My ex-husband's lawyer smiled and said, "You're walking away with nothing. He's already won." I signed the papers silently. Weeks later, his bank accounts were frozen after the forensic team discovered that one of his silent business partners was. I'll never forget the look on his lawyer's face. Smug. That little smirk, like he'd just won the lottery and I was the fool who bought the wrong ticket. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said it like a cold fact, like it wasn't even worth a second thought. "You're walking away with nothing. He's already won." And I sat there, frozen. My hands gripped the pen so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears so loud I could barely hear the sound of my own voice when I muttered, "Okay." And then I signed the divorce papers. Just like that. I remember walking out of that room, out of that building, really, feeling like I was in a fog. Like my whole life had just been swept away in a gust of wind, and I had no idea where I even was anymore. The man I built a life with for 14 years, the man I supported when he started his business in our tiny garage, the man I had kids with, he just sat there, watching me crumble, like it was just another day at the office. I spent the next few weeks in a daze. I stayed in my small apartment, barely unpacked, barely slept. My lawyer, what a joke he was, kept telling me it was over. That I should move on. That these things happen. But then, I was cleaning out a box of old papers I had brought from the house, stuff I grabbed in a rush before Mark changed the locks on me, and something caught my eye. A printout. It was a transaction, $85,000 wired to an account I didn't recognize. The name on it wasn't Mark's. It wasn't anyone I knew. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just another part of Mark's business world I never understood. But the more I looked, the more I started to realize, this wasn't a one-off. There were more transactions. Different amounts, different dates, different names. They all seemed off. I couldn't shake it. So I called a friend, he's an accountant, works for a big firm in Phoenix, and asked him to take a look. I didn't tell him everything, just that I found some weird paperwork. A few days later, he called me back, his voice tense. "Hey, I don't know what you stumbled on here, but this isn't nothing. This is money laundering. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. You need to get someone on this." My stomach dropped. Money laundering? Shell companies? I could barely breathe. That's when I knew I had to act. I wasn't going to just sit there and let that smirk be the end of my story. So I hired a forensic accountant. A real pro. I spent the little money I had left on him, praying it wasn't a waste. He started digging into Mark's financials, his business records, and everything else I could get my hands on. Weeks passed. I was nervous, on edge, but when the report finally came back, it was worse than I ever could have imagined. Mark hadn't just been hiding money. He hadn't just been cheating on me with that assistant of his. No, he was in deep with a silent partner, a guy named Victor Ortega. Victor was a felon. He had done time years ago for fraud and racketeering. The guy was toxic. And now, Mark's businesses were tied to his dirty money. Offshore accounts, fake invoices, laundering funds from God knows what kinds of shady deals. It was all there. Every ugly detail. I took the report straight to the authorities. The IRS. The FBI. The state attorney general. Hell, I even sent a copy to the local newspaper. I didn't care anymore. Let them all see. Let them all know the truth. It took a few weeks, but then it started happening. The first thing I heard was that Mark's accounts had been frozen. The government was investigating his businesses, and they had frozen everything. Then, I found out that his office had been raided, computers seized, files taken. His employees were being questioned. Mark called me once, screaming into the phone, accusing me of ruining his life. I just sat there, listening, and then I hung up. It was all crumbling around him. The man who had sat across from me in that courtroom, smiling, thinking he had won, he was now fighting for his life. And I wasn't done yet. Mark called me again. This time, it wasn't just screaming. His voice was shaking, panicked. Do you know what you've done? They're freezing everything. My accounts, my properties, everything. My lawyer can't even get into the records. What the hell did you do? I didn't say much. I let him rant, let him stew in his own fear. He had no idea how deep this went. But I knew. The forensic accountant kept sending me updates. The more they dug, the more they found. Fraudulent tax filings. Faked employee payrolls. Fake invoices for services that never happened. Mark and his silent partner, Victor Ortega, had been running a full-on money laundering scheme through their companies, property management, a consulting firm, even a landscaping business that didn't own a single lawnmower. And it wasn't just tax evasion. No, it was worse. Victor Ortega wasn't just some shady businessman. He had ties to an organized crime group out of Las Vegas. Mark had been laundering their money, dirty cash from gambling, drugs, and who knows what else, right under the noses of the feds for years. Now the feds were closing in. I found out from my lawyer, who was suddenly a lot more attentive now, that the feds had issued subpoenas for Mark's records, and a grand jury had been convened. They were building a case. Mark's world wasn't just crumbling, it was imploding. His calls kept coming. Angry, desperate, even tearful. At one point, he showed up outside my apartment, pounding on the door, yelling that he needed to talk. I didn't open it. I watched from the window as he stood there, shoulders slumped, defeated. And then, the real twist came. The silent partner, Victor, wasn't just being investigated. He had flipped. The feds had flipped him. Victor was turning over evidence. Emails, bank records, contracts, everything, to save himself. And he was naming Mark as the mastermind behind it all. It was a total reversal. Mark thought he was untouchable, the big man on the hill. Now he was the target. I heard through the grapevine, one of Mark's old employees called me late at night, whispering into the phone, that Mark's house had been searched. They had taken everything, computers, safe deposit keys, even the artwork off his walls. His accounts were frozen, his businesses were seized, and the feds were looking into everything. And here's where it really hit home, Mark's lawyer, the same smug bastard who had told me I was walking away with nothing, suddenly called me. He left a voicemail, sounding shaken. He wanted to discuss options. Said there might be a way to revisit the divorce settlement. Yeah, no kidding. I didn't call him back. Not yet. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted Mark to feel the fear and the helplessness I had felt when I sat in that courtroom, signing away my life like it was nothing. But I wasn't done. I knew something Mark didn't know yet. Victor wasn't the only silent partner. There was another one. Someone even closer to Mark. Someone who had been hiding in plain sight. And once I found the proof, I was going to bring the whole damn house of cards down. A week later, I got a message on Facebook. It was from a woman named Andrea. Someone I barely knew, a friend of a friend from back when Mark and I used to go to charity galas. I hadn't thought about her in years. The message was short. Hey, I think you need to see this. Call me. I hesitated. I stared at that message for hours. Finally, I called. Andrea picked up right away, her voice low and urgent. I didn't know if I should reach out, but I just found out something, and you need to hear it. She told me Mark had another partner. Someone even closer than Victor Ortega. Someone I had trusted. It was Jack. Jack, Mark's best friend since college. The guy who was the best man at our wedding. The one who came over every holiday, who I cooked for, who played with our kids like they were his own nieces and nephews. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Andrea said she overheard Jack bragging at a private event. How he and Mark had been running this operation for years. How they had used me as a pawn, a way to keep the IRS and others off their scent. I was the perfect cover, the supportive wife who knew nothing, who could be paraded around as proof that Mark was a family man just trying to build a life. Jack and Mark weren't just friends. They were partners in every dirty deal. Jack had set up shell corporations under his name, so if the heat ever came down on Mark, Jack could take the fall. It was all planned out. But now, with Victor flipping, the plan was falling apart. And I realized. Jack wasn't just Mark's partner in business. He had been sleeping with Mark's assistant, the same one Mark had cheated on me with. They were all tangled up together in this mess: money, lies, betrayal. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the walls, feeling like I was living in someone else's life. How did I not see it? How did I let this happen? The next day, I went to my lawyer's office, slammed Andrea's message and the new information down on his desk, and told him we needed to act fast. I wanted the feds to know about Jack. I wanted them to see the full picture. The forensic accountant started digging again, this time into Jack's finances. And what they found was explosive. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, luxury cars bought under fake LLCs, cash transfers between Jack and Victor, and even payouts to Mark's assistant under a fake consulting contract. I sent it all to the authorities. I could feel it all snowballing, getting bigger and bigger. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. This was turning into a federal case that could put people behind bars for years. Mark must have known, because his calls stopped. Dead silence. No texts, no voicemails, nothing. It was like he vanished. But I wasn't done. I started hearing from others, old clients of Mark's, former employees. They reached out quietly, nervously, like they were afraid to be seen talking to me. One woman, a receptionist who used to work at Mark's main office, told me she had seen Mark shredding files late at night, pulling hard drives from computers, telling everyone to mind their business or they'd be fired. She handed me a flash drive. Said she made a backup of some files before she quit. Said she didn't know what was on it, but it felt wrong. When I plugged it into my laptop. Emails. Dozens of them. Between Mark, Jack, Victor, and others. Explicit details of deals, payments, fake invoices, bribes, even payments to local officials. This was bigger than I thought. And I knew. It wasn't over yet. It all came to a head when the FBI knocked on my door. 2 agents, both wearing suits, both looking serious. They introduced themselves, showed their badges, and asked if they could come in. My heart was racing. I invited them in, sat them down, and they asked me questions, about Mark, about the businesses, about the documents and flash drives I had. I told them everything. I handed over the flash drive, the forensic reports, the emails, everything I had. One of the agents, a woman named Agent Moore, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Ma'am, this is going to blow up. We're going to need your full cooperation. Are you ready for that?" I nodded. I was ready. The next few months were chaos. Mark was indicted on federal charges: money laundering, wire fraud, tax evasion, racketeering. Jack was charged too, along with Victor Ortega, who had already cut a deal with the government. It hit the news hard. Local outlets, then national ones. Phoenix businessman arrested in massive fraud case. Luxury homes, cars seized in FBI raid. Former wife's tip leads to unraveling of fraud scheme. Mark's lawyer, the same one who smirked at me in that conference room? He was arrested too. Turns out, he had been part of it, advising Mark on how to hide assets, helping file fake documents. His whole law firm was under investigation. It was like watching dominoes fall. Mark lost everything: his businesses, his properties, his cars, his fancy memberships at golf clubs. His accounts were drained by legal fees. His so-called friends vanished. His mistress, the assistant? She was subpoenaed too, dragged into court, and her career destroyed. And Jack? Jack tried to run. Tried to leave the country. The feds caught him at the airport, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. They arrested him right there in front of everyone. His wife, who had no idea what was going on, filed for divorce within a week. I watched all of it unfold like a movie. But here's the part that I never expected. When the feds finished their investigation, they found something on me too. Turns out, some of the accounts were partially in my name. Mark had forged my signature on some documents years ago, so while I didn't know what I was signing, technically, I was listed as an account holder on a couple of offshore accounts. I got dragged into it. The feds came after me too. I wasn't facing jail time, but I did have to pay fines. I had to testify in court, under oath, in front of everyone. Mark, Jack, the media. I had to sit there and admit, in front of the world, that I didn't read the documents I signed. That I let Mark handle everything. That I trusted him. It was humiliating. I wasn't innocent. I had been blind. And I paid for it. But I also watched as Mark was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Jack got 15 years. Victor got a lighter sentence because he flipped, 7 years. The lawyer got 10 years for conspiracy. Mark sat there in court, staring straight ahead, not looking at me, not looking at anyone. Just stone cold. I walked out of that courtroom free, but changed. I didn't get the money back. Most of it was gone. The feds seized what they could, but the fines, the legal fees, the damage, it ate up almost everything. But I didn't care about the money anymore. I cared that Mark was in a prison cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit, eating off a metal tray, with no one left to call him a genius or a visionary businessman. I cared that Jack was locked up, that Victor had to testify in front of everyone, that the lawyer lost his license and his freedom. I cared that the truth came out. And I cared that I survived it. I rebuilt my life, slowly, painfully. I took a job at a local accounting firm, learned the ropes, and started over. I made sure my kids were okay, that they knew I loved them, even when things were hard. I learned to read every document. To ask questions. To never trust someone just because they smiled and told me they had it handled. The people who tried to ruin me, Mark, Jack, Victor, the lawyer, the mistress, they all got what they deserved. And I walked away with my freedom. And that's more than Mark can say.